Join me as I dive into the history books and attempt to separate fact from fiction about the real Leonidas. Leonidas is one of the most iconic names in history, a king of Sparta, a hero of the ancient world, and a legendary warrior. But how much of what we know about him is based on fact, and how much is myth, legend, or downright fiction? Separating historical fact from fictionalized accounts is a challenge that historians and scholars face all the time, and Leonidas is a perfect example of this problem. The ancient Greeks didn't leave us with a wealth of primary sources, so we have to rely on secondary accounts, many of which were written centuries after the events they describe. This means that we have to be careful not to take everything at face value. We need to question, to critique, and to analyze the sources we have. One of the biggest hurdles is the fact that many of the ancient sources were written with a specific agenda or bias. They were often meant to entertain, to persuade, or to promote a particular ideology, rather than to provide an objective account of events. This means that we need to read between the lines, to look for corroboration, and to be aware of the cultural and historical context in which they were written. Another problem is that many of the stories about Leonidas have been embellished, exaggerated, or simply invented over time. This is especially true when it comes to the Battle of Thermopylae, which has become a kind of legendary last stand against the forces of darkness. But what really happened at Thermopylae, and how much of the story has been distorted or fabricated? Despite these challenges, we can still piece together a pretty accurate picture of who Leonidas was and what he did. He was a member of the Agiad dynasty, which ruled Sparta for centuries, and he came to power in the early 5th century BCE. He's most famous for leading the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, but he was also a skilled diplomat and politician who played a key role in the development of the Peloponnesian League. Leonidas was a product of his time and culture, and his role in the Battle of Thermopylae was part of a much larger conflict between the Greeks and the Persians. He was a brave and skilled warrior, but he was also a pragmatist who knew when to fight and when to retreat. And despite the myths that have grown up around him, he was still a human being like the rest of us. So what truly defines Leonidas as a historical figure, separate from the Hollywood portrayal in movies like 300? For one thing, his bravery and selflessness in the face of overwhelming odds are still an inspiration to people all over the world. But it's also his complexity, his nuance, and his humanity that make him such a fascinating figure. In the end, the real story of Leonidas is one of courage, duty, and sacrifice. But it's also a reminder of the importance of distinguishing fact from fiction in historical narratives. By separating the myths from the reality, we can get a much clearer understanding of who this legendary figure really was and what his legacy means to us today. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the history books. If you want to explore more historical figures with similar videos, be sure to check out the links in the description box below. And don't forget to share your thoughts on Leonidas in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.